welcome back to the show, everyone. This is our 101st show. And last week, unfortunately, Bryan, you couldn't be with us for good reason. But
blame Lanny, don't blame me. I didn't time it.
But Joey and I went the whole show, and then right at the end remembered that was our 100th episode. Like, that was supposed to be the big thing. But yeah, it's 100 episodes. It's unbelievable.
We'll have a delayed party when Joey's back next week.
Yeah, so speaking of Joe, unfortunately, he's not going to be able to make it tonight. But we had to do tonight because we've got a really cool guest coming up for everyone. So we'll get into that in a second. But before getting into that, I just wanted to do one more quick plug because this is going to be our second last episode before the season closes up. So our last episode is going to be on the 30th of November. So that's 2 weeks and a day from now. And we will do a live stream, middle of the day, Australia, New Zealand time. So if anyone's keen, go on to Instagram, search for the Shop Stool Podcast, and you can get all the details there. So we'll be doing it live on Instagram, and it'd be great if everyone could come along and throw some questions at us, give us something to talk about.
I would also say that I've been getting a heap of DMs on the Instagram account referring to topics that we touch on in the show. It'd be really great if people, rather than DMing, if they put it in the comments of the photos that I put on each of the Instagram posts, because there's so much good stuff coming that, you know, it's great. It's answering questions directly to Joey, Robin and myself, but there's information out there that needs to get put to the wider audience. So if you put it in the comments, then everyone can see it, rather than me just forwarding it on to Joey or Robin.
Yeah, and that was always the point of Instagram. I mean, I know Instagram is not necessarily a community forum, but that was always the purpose of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's been great having people engage with it, and it's good. It shows that it was worthwhile finally setting it up after all these years.
Yeah, it took us long enough.
Yeah.
All right, so with that housekeeping out of the way, let's get on to our guest, because we have a guest all the way from Ireland today, from County Cork. As I've just had explained to me, I didn't realise that Cork was more than a county area. I didn't realise it was actually a city. So I just want to welcome to the show Paul O'Brien. How are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me on.
It's great to have a guest on here that finally understands what I'm saying.
Just about.
Yeah.
And I wondered how long it was going to take us to get to that. I kind of need Joey here to back me up as a non-Irish. So Paul, for you operate a company called Modet, making furniture. Just interested to hear how you got to this point. Was woodworking part of the family? Is that something you've always done, or how did you get to being a furniture maker?
Well, it was a fairly kind of long route. I didn't start training until I was 30, so I'm 10 years at it now. I just turned 40. But prior to that, I had done all sorts of things. My kind of first sort of interest, I suppose, was music and things like that. And I was a sound engineer for a while, and then I went to art school and, you know, did what you do in art school. And I lived in London for about 7 years, which is where I moved to London to go to art school. And it kind of, it was great, and I learned a lot, but it wasn't really a career or job or anything. So I wasn't getting any younger, so I said, right, what am I going to do? And I knew I had to do something creative. I knew I wanted to do something with my hands, and ideally I wanted to be my own boss. And sort of Google basically told me that furniture making might be a good option. So I went and I did a short 1 day a week course in London Metropolitan University, and on like the second day I was there, the teacher took me aside and said, right, you're all over this, here's extra stuff to do. And I was like, this was it. I was away.
Hooked.
So yeah, completely, total like light bulb moment. Why the hell didn't I do this? 20 years ago, kind of a thing. Yeah, and I kind of didn't look back. So I finished that course and I applied for a 2-year full-time course in a place called the Building Crafts College in East London. It's a City and Guilds course. So you do kind of, the first year is just introduction to joinery. So you just learn basic, everything's done in softwood. You learn about introduction to machinery, hand skills. You make things like door frames and small scale staircases, things like that. And then in the second year, then you are given your own bench, and we had to make 3 pieces of furniture in hardwood that we designed ourselves. We were given some very basic criteria of a chair, a table, and a small cabinet. And I basically lived there for 2 years. And towards the end of the second year, I kind of decided, I always knew I wanted to do my own thing, but I also knew I had a lot to learn still. So I started basically trying to find a job. At the time, myself and my now wife, we had decided we were going to move back home to Ireland from London. So I basically contacted a handful of high-end furniture studios in Ireland to see if anybody was looking for makers, and I was lucky enough to get a job with the Joseph Walsh studio in Cork. So I went straight from college to being a maker there for about 2.5 years. And then I decided to strike out my own, and I'm coming up on 6 years now in business on my own. It's all going really well. I'm very busy. I wouldn't say I'm making money yet, but we're working on that. But there's plenty of commissions, there's plenty of jobs, there's plenty of interests. I've won a few awards, got some press. I'm just back from London. A couple of weeks back, I did my first exhibition at London Design Festival. That went really well. A lot of good feedback, a lot of interest. So yeah, that's kind of it, really.
That's pretty good summary.
That's a good story.
Yeah,
I would have assumed. I would have assumed that you'd just with the way your website and your Instagram is all crafted, it's got a very warm, homely feel to it. And maybe this is jumping to conclusions, but I just assumed that this was going to have been a trade that was in your family, and you just had a family of woodworkers. I don't know. You just it just comes across like that in your material.
Well, my father is he's retired now. He was a mechanic, a bus mechanic for 42 years, and it's just one of those, inherently practical people. When I was growing up, he was always doing stuff in the house, and we were helping him, and there was never a man in to do anything. If something was broken, he fixed it, and that's just the way. So I've always been a very hands-on person. I mean, even in art school, ostensibly I was there to study. I was studying like sound design and stuff, but I basically ended up building things. I made sculptures and things out of I bought old analog tape machines and old transistor radios and ripped them apart and made them into sculptures and stuff like that. So it was always I think I was too practical for the art world, so which is probably why I ended up doing this. Yeah, like that, just that general approach to just doing stuff, trying it out. Then if it doesn't work, try something different. So that's other people seem more surprised than I am that I ended up doing this in some ways. It seemed like it was a long trip, but it seems like a fairly natural progression. And I think that probably the art background is probably I was always super aware of the kind of the how the business was portrayed, the look of it, the feel of it. That's a huge part of it, and that's definitely something I learned when I was in Joseph Walsh's. That the branding side of it is massive. Like, it really is. You could spend so much time marketing and stuff. You have to, that's a huge part of it. If you're after a certain type of business or client or whatever, you really, really need to focus on that. Because there's a lot of us now. There's a lot of competition out there, and to kind of stand out a bit, you kind of really need to make sure. And particularly, like, as well, with things like, you know, everybody's got a quality phone in their pocket now. There's no excuse for not having half decent photos and, you know, half decent Instagram or whatever.
We were saying the same thing. I don't know whether you listened to the interview that we did with Nick Padula in Sydney.
Yeah, I did.
But we were saying the same thing to him. You know, just the consistency of his imaging and the overall appearance.
He's got it down, doesn't he? Yeah.
Yeah. Well, you've got it as well. But yeah, it's just the consistency of it and the quality of lighting, and there is a value that you can see that you've really invested time into crafting that. So yeah, it definitely shines through, mate.
And you know it's his stuff. As soon as you see a photo, you know it's him.
Yeah.
You know.
Yep. So obviously, me being from Ireland, but I've never lived there since I was 18, and that was prior to my engagement in the world in furniture. So I have no idea what it's like, apart from when I did my visit to Joseph Walsh's studio. I have no idea what it's like operating a business in Ireland. So
yes,
can you talk us through in terms of, like, because Ireland, like, people think of it as green and forested and stuff. Is there actually any commercial forestry in Ireland? Like, do you get your timbers all imported, or where do they come from?
So as far as I am aware, there's no commercial forestry. There are a few people that do native timbers, but they tend to be stuff that's, you know, fallen over in a field somewhere, and they'll plank it up and they'll dry it and whatever. I currently get all of my timber. It's usually American. It's, you know, it's the usual. It's the white oak, it's the black walnut, and the ash. It, by and large, I buy it just in a local timber place in Cork, and like that they ship it in from the States or from Europe. I am currently looking at sourcing some native timbers for certain pieces.
Yeah, but it's that thing about volume and quantity.
Yeah,
if you ever
can I get what
orders?
I want exactly when I need it, and is the quality going to be there? Particularly because you've probably seen the side of my stuff. There's a lot of slim legs and things. It needs to be fairly clean grained stuff. It can't be knotty, twisty kind of. So there are certain pieces that I could probably do, smaller pieces, side tables, things like that in native stuff, and I am looking at that. But no, at the minute, as far as I am aware, and that, like, I could be, someone could correct me on this, but as far as I'm aware, there's no commercial hardwood sort of timber industry in Ireland.
You go ahead. You go, Ron.
I was just going to say, out of interest, what is a native species of hardwood timber there in Ireland?
It's all the European stuff, right? So you get your usual, your oak, ash, walnut, beech, things like that.
So there's nothing specific to Ireland?
No.
Okay.
No, nothing. Not that I know of. No. Nothing. We don't have any of the cool names that you have, all your red gums and jarras and all this stuff. Yeah. So it's the kind of it's basically sort of just northern hemisphere sort of hardwoods. But I like them as well, to be honest. I mean, I tend to avoid tropical timbers as much as possible for a number of reasons. Like, ethically, they can be questionable, you know, how they're forested and stuff sometimes, and also they tend to not be fun to work with.
Yeah.
they're too bloody hard and sappy and unpleasant. I like oak particularly because you can it covers the gamut for clients. Because you can do so much to it. You can have it dark, you can have it brown, you can have it black, you can light it, you can bleach it, you can, you know. Plus, everybody has a thing about oak, whether they even know what oak is or not. I mean, I'm sure you've all had this with clients. It must be oak. And if you showed them a piece of oak and a piece of ash, they couldn't tell you which was which.
Yeah.
You know, but it has to be oak.
Yep.
So, you know, there's that as well.
My kitchen benchtop are made out of European beech.
And
chunky boards. And it's one of the best timbers I've worked with. I appreciate what you're saying about ease of use, especially with the stuff that we get here in Australia that is just, it's hard as steel. Working with the timber like that is it's just fun. It makes the process enjoyable.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I like to work with walnut, but it can be very soft, too unforgivingly soft. You put it down too hard on a bench and there's a dent in it, things like that. So I think oak is a good kind of in between for hardness, but beauty and things like that. But I wouldn't say I'm a particularly woody woodworker, if you know what I mean. I'm someone who's attracted to the design of a piece, the overall kind of silhouette of it, the look of it, rather than the grain and the timber. I mean, that's obviously a huge part of it, but it's not my sort of driving force, if you like. I'm not a big kind of wood fan.
Yeah. I was going to say, this is something that, like, when I was growing up, if you had told me that high-end sort of luxury furniture could be coming out of Ireland and going around the world, I would have been like, how does that make economic sense? Like, how can you operate from, like, it's fair enough the second biggest city in Ireland, but it's still quite a remote little place. Yeah. But now in hindsight, I'm looking at it and I'm in a much, much bigger city in Australia, but your audience that you have on your doorstep is amazing. Like, to have, the whole EU. I don't know, do you sell much stuff into Europe or mainland UK, or where does most of your stuff end up?
Up until this point, and I would say up until about 3 months ago, it was all Ireland.
Right.
And literally in the last couple of months, I've kind of reached the point now where it's a numbers game. The entire population of Ireland is only about 4 million people. So that audience is gonna sort of plateau pretty soon. So in order for me to grow the business and to continue doing what I'm doing, I have to look abroad. And like you said, obviously Brexit is a fun spanner in the works, because the UK was obviously the obvious first stop. It's literally next door. It's English speaking. I lived there for 7 years. In saying that, it's not impossible either. It's just paperwork. And
so is it only paperwork, or is there additional taxes that are being applied to?
It depends what day you ask on, to be perfectly honest. They seem to be making up. When I went over to the UK for London a couple of weeks back, it was nearly over before it began. I rented a van to drive over. I drove through the Irish customs, no problem. I got to the UK and they asked me, did I have any paperwork? And I said I didn't. I didn't think I needed any from what I could gather. I was only exhibiting, I wasn't selling anything. Yeah. And I was taken into a large shed and told in no uncertain terms that they could confiscate all of the furniture in the van, and that was a fun half hour. Wow. So
it just totally depends who's prime minister on that day, is it?
Kind of, yeah. And I don't know, the mood is is the guy having a bad day in customs, or I don't know. But one of them seemed to be a bit of a wood nerd. He opened the van and straight away said linseed oil, because I used the Rubio Monaco, which is linseed, and he was admiring the stuff. So I gave him a bit of a turn on the charm, and I was sent on my way with a wagging finger behind me. So I'll know for next time. But yeah, it's a bit mad, like the way it's all work. But like I said, it's just another thing to work out. Like I'm hopefully doing a big job now in the States soon, and again, it's just paperwork. I've just sent the piece to a small side table to Switzerland. They all just have their own little things of what codes and this and that and the other. But yeah, it's definitely 100%. It's where the business is going. We're going to have to look at the rest of the EU and the States and stuff. It's just, and like particularly I think when you get to a certain price point with your furniture, the extra couple of £100 to ship it to X, Y, and Z, people don't really bat an eyelid. They want it. It costs what it costs. Yep. So
that's a good place to be.
Yeah, well, we're getting there slowly but surely. It's a hard game, and it's like I still feel like I'm only starting out and I'm only working things out, and there's still that panic every time you send a a quote going, "Oh, too much, is it too little? Oh my God."
And they come back and then you think, oh geez, now I've got to actually build it.
Now I'm gonna do it. I know, yeah, the fear. Yeah, exactly. But yeah, like we've been really lucky recently. I did a huge job this year. It's the biggest job we've ever done. I got a call out of the blue to do a restaurant. There's a 5-star restaurant about 40-minute drive from my workshop. That was bought last year by some businessmen from Singapore, and but they have Irish connections, and they were, to their credit, they wanted to work with Irish and local suppliers as much as possible to fit out the restaurant. So I made all of the tables and chairs and trolleys and different things like that. I recommended some friends of mine who have a metalworking forge, and they made all kinds of table implements for them, and they had all the plates and pots and stuff made by a crowd out in East Cork and stuff like that. I mean, they could have very easily opened a catalogue, ordered it all, and paid a quarter of the price. But like I said, they didn't, and they worked, and now they're aiming to get some Michelin stars, and it's been a great project. But it was huge. It was 40 chairs and 11 tables, and it was massive. Like, yeah, it was, and I had to design everything from scratch as well. So, didn't make as much.
I can't think of too many Australian restaurants that have chairs made by Australian makers.
It was it was an amazing project to get. It was funny when they rang me up initially. They were looking at my website and they saw my Langford chair, which is very elaborate kind of piece, and they were asking about 40 of those, and my brain was screaming at wow, this will make the business, but it might kill me if I have to make 40 of these. Luckily, in some ways, that was outside of the budget, so I designed something specific for them, and I really like to work like that. I like to get a kind of a framework, or a kind of it needs to do X, Y, and Z. Here's how much money we have. What can you do? Right? Can I do something within that? In fairness, I probably didn't charge enough in the long run. I ended up having to take on staff and stuff just to get the job out the door. One day there'll be a job with an appropriate budget and time frame, but I haven't come across it yet. It was amazing. So we're still kind of, the dust is still kind of settling on that. They've only been open a month or two now. So
what's the name of the restaurant for anybody in Ireland?
Teore, Teore. It's in the Castlemartyr Resort in East Cork. It's an amazing space. It's all, I don't know what it is, 10 or 15 course tasting menu and all this kind of stuff. So yeah.
You keep talking about we. Who's the other person?
We.
Is it just you? Okay, I wondered if you had a team.
No, I kind of have a team, yeah. So there's, besides myself, my wife works part-time in the business on the administration, marketing, email side of things. I have a full-time maker with me in the shop as well, James, and I have a few part-time people that I kind of get in sort of ad hoc as I need them. Shout out to Liz. Liz listens to the show. And there's a few people like that that I kind of have in my kind of orbit. I haven't, it's something I always remember in the early days of the business, someone saying, do you do best, outsource the rest. And I really try to do that. So I have an accountant. I don't, I have a person who's my website, things like that. They're not my strengths. It's a waste of my time to do them, pay someone else to do them. It's actually costs less to pay an accountant to do my accounts than to me to spend 3 or 4 days a month doing them wrong, things like that. So there is a we, and the we is growing. I'm hoping to take on a maker now, a full-time maker in the new year. I've big plans.
Yeah, cool.
Can we rewind a bit and talk about the Joseph Walsh internship?
Certainly.
Are you over it yet? Are you processed it all?
Getting there. It was an amazing experience. It really was. Like, it was it's Willy Wonka's wood factory, to be honest. And I was a wood Oompa Loompa for 2.5 years. But it's I've never been in a workshop like it, or don't really know of anywhere like, particularly in this neck of the woods. I mean, it is literally on a farm up a lane in like Cork. It's, you know, it's and it's, from when I've left, even it's grown massively. There was a huge shed. It must be 10,000 square foot that we just use for storage, which has now been converted to the main workshop. It's got underfloor heating throughout, you know, this kind of thing. It's I haven't been up to see it yet, but it's quite an operation. Like, I mean, he's I have to admire what he's done and what he's built from where he is, because and like that, he has, I'd say from being there, I probably learned as much about the furniture game, the furniture business, as I did about making furniture. I mean, with the making side of it, when I arrived, I was let's say it was a hump straightener. when I left college, I'd like make 3 pieces of furniture, and I was, you know, I thought I was, yeah, I'm hot shit here. And then and I got into Joe's, and it was like, nope, you're just shit. So I spent probably the first year, I'd say, sanding, and I worked with a team of there was 6 makers, including myself, in the workshop.
Oh, there was only 6 when you were there?
There's only 6, yeah. There was 2 Japanese guys, 2 French guys, and me and one other Irish guy. And it was split into 2 teams of 3. And I was working with the 2 Japanese guys initially, which was amazing, because their approach, it was just like, yeah, it's so different. And I worked with the French makers for a while. It is really interesting to work with the kind of the different traditions, the woodworking approaches, because we'd all have tool boards with our tools on them, and over time everyone's tool board started to look similar because we cherry pick.
Well, it just became hybrids.
Basically, yeah. Like with the Japanese planes, for example, everyone ended up with a collection of Japanese planes. They're the business. They really are. And I have a small collection of Japanese shaping planes. When I use for all my kind of fancier stuff, I use them for that, like little tiny spoon planes, little 1/2-inch blades on them and stuff. It's things like that.
So with Joseph Waltz, the studio, I've just from the conversations we've had in the past, Bryan, I've assumed that he was a furniture maker and designer, and that was it. Does he constantly have classes? I mean, is he constantly working with people
in the workshop?
Yeah, like is he a furniture maker and designer, or is he a teacher?
He is a businessman and a designer.
Diplomatic.
He doesn't do any making anymore. It's designed.
Right. Okay.
I don't want to get sued or anything. He designs the stuff, and there's a design office, and they will translate his designs into drawings, or oftentimes we'd just be given small models, sketch models, and we'd have to scale them up and make them into furniture.
I think when I was in there, he was using like foam and carving foam to make backrests and things that would then be scanned by the design team or something.
Yeah, foam, or just small pieces of veneer, like the little models that were made exactly the same way as the large pieces, just bent pieces of ash. Literally run them under a hot tap so they're flexible, and bend them into shape and pin them and glue them, and you know it's like a lot of woodworking. I think the principle of how it's done is relatively simple. It's the execution that's difficult. You know, if you kind of, you know, what he's doing is kind of, you know, it's bent laminations. People, you know, most woodworkers know how to do some sort of a bent lamination. It's just that extrapolated to the kind of ultimate. Not to make it sound easier or anything, because it really isn't. Like, I mean, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of hours in most of those pieces, and like I said, across the team, like it was. But like I learned a hell of a lot, and after 2.5 years, I'd worked up to making full pieces and stuff, and the itch was just getting stronger to do my own thing, and I just decided, right. And more people kind of were. I'd been back home then a few years. I'd established the contacts and the network and stuff, and more and more people were asking me, "Can you do something for me? Can you do something for me?" And eventually, I was like, "Okay, you know what? I can. Yeah, to hell with it. Let's do it." So I took the leap, and I was literally working in my back garden with power tools for a couple of months, which is fun in the Irish weather, running in and out to the spare room, and then eventually I found a little space, and then I found a bigger space, and now I have about 2,000 square foot in an old cow shed, which is delightful.
No
for
underfloor heating?
4 months of the year. That's it all. How many layers can you work in? I'm like a Michelin man. It's nice in the summer, but it's not so nice in the winter. But I'm hoping now maybe next year to start looking for a different space. It's a difficult one. Space is a hard one here because it tends to be like that. It's an old cow shed, or it's like a 10,000 square foot industrial unit in a industrial estate. There's not a lot of in between, and it's hard to find somewhere with, particularly because obviously things like moisture and all are such an issue for what we do, and Ireland is a damp place. It's very difficult to find. I've basically built a kind of an insulated box within my workshop where as I'm working on pieces, they go in and out of it, and it's not ideal, but it's, you have to make do initially. It's a hard game to get going in from that respect. It's so chicken and egg. You need to get the work, you need the workshop, but to get the workshop, you need the work. So it's, I've built a workshop. It's a decent workshop. I've got, all the machines and stuff that I need, mostly. It's getting there.
You go, Brian.
I was just going to ask you about design influences and things that we were talking with, again, Nick Padula. I can't remember whether it was after we'd finished recording the show or whether it was during the show. We were talking about his bench that he's done, the sort of twisted bent lamb thing. And he was asking us, did we think that it was too derivative of other people's work, whether it was too Joseph Wall. And I'm like, I think it's a really straightforward thing just for people to say, well, all bent lamb is derived from that. But it's just because it's a new language of furniture. Like I can definitely see that his influence in your work, but your work looks very different at the same time. I like that there's slightly more meat in your pieces than his. I like that there's a bit more mass. Talk to us about when you were doing your furniture course. Did your furniture look anything like this at all? Was it quite sculptural?
I think, God, that's a huge question.
What was it? Because for me personally, like my pretty much 95% of my work is quite linear.
Yeah.
Because it's something that I've always enjoyed, like from studying architecture. I could always admire the kind of Zaha Hadidi sort of stuff, but it was never my personal aesthetic. I like repetitive lines and things like that, and that's what started to influence my furniture. So did you find that your design ethos evolved and you developed that aesthetic taste from working with Joseph Walsh, or was it something that had, that developed over a longer period?
I think that I had definitely had my own, like, there's a desk I did in college, which is basically a simplified version of a desk I still do, and it's very kind of clean lines and things like that. I think what happened was that I think unconsciously I probably designed in line with what I could make. before I went to Joseph Walsh's. And post Joseph Walsh's, because I learned to make pretty much anything, I was no longer restrained by how will I do this. So
Yep.
the design, I mean, I think I've always designed kind of back to front. I've always designed it first and then work out how will I make it. But because of the skills that I learned, and I think the main thing I learned was not even, I mean, I don't do any bent, all my stuff is carved from solid. I don't use bent lambs or anything. Excuse me. And but I think what I really learned was to deal with timber as a 3-dimensional object that can be cut into, as opposed to, I think when you're learning sort of the basics, it's all about planes coming together, you know, and all of a sudden it's like, well, if those two planes, when they come together, are sort of blended, and you know, and you make them out of something a bit chunky, well then you can carve this detail into them or whatever. It's a combination. I think my stuff is a combination of sort of the overall form and then the detail within that form. I'm a big fan of Finn Newell's designs. I think he has that that kind of mixture of the overall form, the silhouette of the piece is beautiful, but then when you actually get in close, there's all these little details, these little tactile little corners and edges and shadows, and you know, and that's, I try to apply that to my own stuff. I mean, yeah, I think like no one's operating in a vacuum either. I mean, you know, I think originality as an idea is sort of, I don't know if it's defunct now. It's like, I mean, even Joseph Walsh's stuff, there are designers from the 20s and 30s who were laminating things and stacking things. I mean Wendell Castle and stuff, people like that were doing, you know, the carved stacked stuff for, you know, donkeys years ago. It's no one's operating in a vacuum. Even like Hans Wegner, who I'm a massive fan of, like his Chinese chair, it's basically a Chinese chair. If you look at a book of antique Chinese furniture, that's what it is, you know. And then he extrapolated that into all of his iconic designs, you know. So it's yeah, I mean, there's definitely an influence there from working with Joe's and stuff, but I think it's more the approach rather than the look necessarily. I think my stuff is a little more formalized. I like 4 legs on a chair, things like that. A bit more symmetrical, but curves within that as well. I don't know. It's it's funny, in my notebooks there seems to be, I will draw something and it will be very, very curvy, or I'll draw something and it will be lots of straight lines, and I usually end up somewhere in the middle. But it's just kind of a trial and error process with the designing thing. I tend to mock up and prototype and, you know, mess around with. There's lots of, you know, abandoned bits of legs and backs and stuff in my workshop.
I think you can tell that. I think you can tell that the pieces do go through an iteration. Like, I think the fact as well that a lot of your pieces, like I said, to me, they have a bit more mass than, but the mass is kind of, it's always off the floor. Yeah. It's sort of elevated at either waist height or something, and then it comes down to very, very fine lines. And I think you can tell that you have worked through a process of iteration and prototyping, because I'm guessing that those legs started fatter and you sort of carved them down until you got to a point where, you know, you're playing with what's stable enough, but trying to balance the aesthetics with it. Like that 3-legged Langford console that you do. I absolutely love that piece. I love the connection of the cross rail to the legs. It would be so simple to make those radiuses tighter and pull it all in, but I love that there is, you know, these kind of, I don't know, like webbing that nearly connects that cross rail to the legs. Is really nice.
I'm a big fan of, you know, H.R. Geiger. He designed, you know, the Alien stuff from the Alien movies. That kind of biomechanical, where it's both. It's curvy and organic, but it's constructed and straight as well. And I think as well as I'm progressing, I'm getting more comfortable with straight lines. I think it's initially, I think it was like the all that Langford stuff kind of stemmed from a dining table initially, and I just had this client. You know, it's one of those kind of clients where you're like, she just said, I want a black round table to seat 4 people, and I want it to be beautiful. Go. So it was like, great. So she kind of gave me free rein. So I thought, right, there's not a whole lot you can do with a tabletop. In saying that, I always chamfer the underside and do little edge detail stuff. I was like, right, so the legs are the obvious place to kind of do something. And then I started to look at these kind of alien kind of pointed toes, basically. And like I said, there's concave and convex surfaces. And then I kind of extrapolated other pieces from that, like the side tables, the console, the chair. The chair took about 2 years in total, but between other things, obviously, to kind of refine to what it is now. And I still, every time, you know, I'm sure it's the same, every time you do something, you're like, I think next time I might tweak that or push that or change that, or, you know. Yeah, it's a, I can't remember the question now.
No, it's absolutely. How long can you make a chair now? How long does one of these Langford chairs take?
Too bloody long. I don't know.
Yeah.
I'm still refining the process, because I made the initial prototype, and then I managed to convince a client to commission 8 of them, basically. Yep. So I made 8 of them, and it took far too long. Far too long. But I was working it out, I was making jigs, I was doing all that at the same time. So I'm hoping the next time I do it, it will be significantly quicker, because I've been giving people prices for them. So it better work. So we'll see how we go. But it's I'm also looking at maybe down the road introducing some CNC into the early stages of the process. I still want to keep the hand carving and all that kind of finish, but there's a lot of, you know, kind of just donkey work at the start, where it's just getting cutting, but you know, when it's all bandsawing and spindling, and you know, that could be made significantly more efficient with a CNC without detracting from what the final piece is. I don't currently use anything digital in my process at all. I draw everything 1-to-1 scale on lumps of MDF and stuff like that, and but I mean, I'm not anti it. It's not my training. But I think it's probably realistically the way I need to go if I'm going to make a living out of it all.
Cool. Righto.
Yeah. I have to say, I absolutely love your stuff, man. I look forward to a wee workshop visit next time I am.
Yeah, definitely.
That side of the world.
Yeah. Definitely. I need to get over to Australia as well at some point. I follow so many Australian makers that Instagram seems to think I'm in Australia, and I get ads for stuff in Australia all the time. It's like,
well, that's why
drop some names of what Aussie makers.
Yeah, I'm trying to think now. I really like obviously I like Nathan Day's stuff. His stuff is great. Trying to think now. I've gone blank. You can't put me on the spot like that.
I'll tell you what, you can do us a favourite. Name some Irish makers that we should follow. That's an easier question than what Aussie makers do.
You would think, wouldn't you?
It shouldn't be.
There's a lot of people doing different things. Zaloof and Bell do some really nice stuff. It's very different to what I do. They do a lot of stuff with veneers and things, like cabinets. They do a lot of cabinets with kind of crazy veneers and things. Yep. But I'm in furniture. There's not a huge amount of kind of contemporary furniture makers. There's a lot of furniture makers.
Yep.
You know, there's no shortage of chopping boards in Ireland. So
around the world, really.
So it's a difficult thing, but it's also why it's a hard sell here, because people, you know, in Ireland generally, I mean, I'm sure it's probably the same everywhere, but people are horrified generally for, you know, the prices of it's just a chair. You're like, but it's a chair that, you know, 200 hours or something. You know, it's like, it's a hard sell. But yeah, I don't know. I don't look at that much furniture, to be honest with you. I'm a big fan of architecture and ceramicists and stuff like that more so than furniture. Yeah.
So how did you find the show?
Don't apologize.
How did you find the show then, Paul?
How did I find the show? I'm a bit of an obsessive researcher. When I get into something, I really get into it, and I was like, there's got to be some podcasts about woodworking and stuff, and I think I already followed Bryan on Instagram. I'm not sure. Maybe you mentioned it or something. I can't remember exactly now, to be honest. But yeah, no, I've listened to it for a good while. Yeah, it's a good laugh.
Yeah, well, that's cool, because it's, we've always really pushed the show as Australian Kiwi. That's our target audience. So when Bryan said to all of us, there's this guy Paul, he likes the show, let's have him on. I was quite surprised to find that you were in Ireland.
I'm trying to think, who was the last international that we had on? COC?
It might have. That was a long time ago.
That's a long time ago.
Because we did Neil, we did COC, and then I think that might have been where it all stopped with the international guests. But and then it's only been. It's actually only been Aussie guests. We haven't had...
A few Kiwis.
Am I going to get in trouble for saying that?
Yeah, you will, yeah. Kiwis.
Who am I forgetting?
We've definitely had New Zealand makers.
We're both getting in trouble at this rate.
It's awesome. So thank you so much for taking time at the start of your day to talk to us.
Yeah, I'm off to put chairs together now. Christmas rush is fully on.
Underway.
Yeah,
at least winter hasn't set in over there. It still looks quite balmy.
It's thinking about it. It's thinking about it. Yeah.
We were just saying before the show started there that Robin had snow in Tasmania, and we are 15 days before the start of summer. So, yeah.
Wow.
It's going.
It's
crazy.
the opposite here. There's grass is grown, there's flowers and stuff out. It's just
bonkers.
Warm and wet for the last I don't know how long. So, yeah.
So
let's make furniture.
Yeah. So for everyone listening, if you want to check out more of Paul's stuff, you can have a look at Modet Furniture on Instagram. That's probably going to be the best place. There's also a website, which is a very, very nicely created website for anyone looking to get some inspiration. I'm certainly going to take the idea of putting videos in my website on board, because I really, really like that idea. But yeah, go check out Paul's stuff. I'm with you, Bryan. That console is probably one of the most unique, the uniquest, if that's a word, console tables I've ever seen. So definitely go check that out. Cheers. And thanks again, Paul. It was great to have you on the show.
Worries.
And all the best for the future.
Cool. Keep up the good work. Thanks, guys.
Cheers.
Thanks.
All
Bye.
right, we'll see everybody in the live show.
Yeah.
Yeah. You paying for my ticket to Australia, yeah?
Right.
All the best.
Cool.
See ya.
Take it easy. Bye.
Cheers.
Bye.
Bye.